This is the Heroic Voice, where I talk to comic book creators, people I've worked with, other interesting people about the history of comics, superheroes, and the current state of the comic book industry. I also discuss current and upcoming projects, current events, and any other topics my guests might be interested in talking about. So subscribe and hit the like button. Help me grow this channel and promote indie comic book creators, publishers, and other people affiliated with the comic book industry. Your comments are appreciated. Get to it and leave feedback, good, bad, and otherwise. I am your host, Dennis Mallonee, writer, publisher of the Heroic Multiverse, where we spotlight good girls, bad girls, super babes, and superheroics in a classic, kind of golden agey style. Grab some snacks and enjoy. This is the Heroic Voice. Okay, today is July 20th, 2024, if I'm not mistaken. This is the Heroic Voice. My guest this evening is Rik Offenberger. What is your title, Rik? Your First Comics News. What's your title there? Exactly.
I'm editor-in-chief at First Comics News, and I've been doing this for a little while. First Comics News is 25 years old. We started on the Yahoo list service as superhero news, and when we made the integration to the web from the Yahoo list server, someone else was sitting on the domain name superhero news.
That makes
And
sense.
so we became First Comics News as we made that transition, with the idea that you get your news here first. Originally, we started off as a clipping service, and we were working with a variety of other people who were working at that time. In addition to working before we made the transition to the web, I worked at Silver Bullet Comic Books as the senior editor there. I was a reporter at Newsarama and a reporter at Comic Book Resources, and I did mostly interviews. At Silver Bullet, I also was posting news and hiring people and things like that, but I was just primarily doing interviews at Newsarama and Comic Book Resources.
So First Comics News is, when I look at it, there's a lot of information there. It's pretty comprehensive. You put up everything.
We try and cover independent comics, and so we have a lot of news about independent comics. I mean, there's news about Marvel and DC and Dark Horse and Image, but they don't need us as badly as the people who have limited budgets and are hard to get a focus on. And so we try and do a mix. So, the average reader wants to know what's going on with X-Men. And so we have all the news about X-Men. They want to know what solicitations are coming out from Marvel and DC. But at the same time, we want to cover heroic publishing.
Yay.
And we want to make sure that we give a full spectrum view of what's going on at Heroic and what's going on at First Comics, which was a big deal in the 80s, but produces fewer products today. You know what I mean? We want to cover both big and small. And so we have quantity news as well as quality news. We do a variety of interviews. Sometimes some of our interviewers will interview the same people, but we get different answers. We do a variety of reviews, and the same thing with the reviewers. Some of our reviewers are happy to post negative reviews. Other reviewers, when they read the book, if they don't particularly love it, they don't want to post a negative review. So different philosophies with different reviewers. I've got a guy who's happy to give people 1 star. I've got a guy who says, well, if it's a 1-star book, he'd rather not write the review because he doesn't feel like that's a good use of his time, and he doesn't think it's helpful to the people he's reviewing.
It is.
So
maybe also a case if he doesn't want to publicize stuff that he doesn't like.
Well, I mean, he doesn't want to be negative and tear it down. He's trying to help support the independent community, and it doesn't help to say negative things. At least that's his viewpoint.
Well, I very much appreciate when I do see a Heroic Publishing article on there. You've got a couple of people on who work for you who really seem to like our stuff, and I very much appreciate that.
Oh, yeah. I've got some people who are huge fans, and I got some people who are mediocre. I mean, it's how everything works.
Sure.
There's always someone who everything is their favorite. You know what I mean? If you look at the worst title you ever saw from Marvel Comics, you wonder, how did they ever publish that? you have to realize that behind that, there's an editor who loved it enough to convince Marvel to put money behind it. There's a creative team that loved it enough that they put their blood, sweat, and tears into this, trying to make this stand out. And so every single comic is someone's favorite.
Absolutely. Even
And,
Batman the Human Flying Saucer must have had someone who liked it.
there's still people making new human flying saucer comics.
Oh, I
They're
was
coming out from
unaware of
Anarch
that.
Express.
Oh my
So
goodness.
yeah, there are obviously a few people who like it because they're working on that.
Okay, tell us about the other stuff you do. I mean, because this is all about you, Rick. I mean, I can talk about heroic publishing on every single one of these, but I want the focus to be on our guests. So,
All right. Well, let me just give you a little background for any of your guests who may not have seen me before. I was a comic book retailer, and from that, I was looking at ways to promote my comic store. And one of the things it said was try and become an expert in some portion of your field. Well, I had taken journalism, and so I thought that I should be writing for the Comic Buyer's Guide, which was the trade publication. And I contacted Don Thompson, and that was in the old days before everything was computerized. And I said I wanted to freelance. And so he agreed. And I was in Southern California as Image Comics was forming, but I had made friends with the people at Image Comics, at least some of them, beforehand, before there ever was an Image Comics. I knew Jim Valentino and Rob Liefeld before Image. I had Brian Polito do a store signing when Eve Lerney was just starting at Malibu. I think it was Ariel at the time, but it was part of Malibu. And so I used the people that I knew to help me figure out what angles we could do and what we could cover, and and to network with them to try and get some coverage. And then Image launched, and that was big news. And I would plug my store as much as possible, including with whatever I could do to try and get some notoriety for my store to try and make things work out. After the store closed is when I started superhero news, and I didn't really have the same access to news when I didn't have a retail store, because when I had the retail store, I had access to Marvel and to their PR people in as they did these monthly meetings at Diamond. And so I had phone numbers and names and contacts and things like that.
was that
And
when
without
Carol
the
Kalish
retail,
was still alive when you started out?
yes, 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 yes.
Yes, Carol was.
And Mike Martz was the rep for Marvel at the time, and so I could call him and talk to him. And news was just handled differently in those days. There was no internet where you could get it instantaneously. So when I had once I didn't have the store anymore, I started a clipping service, and so that's how superhero news started. Was a clipping service on Yahoo News Service, and that worked out well for a number of years. And someone from Comics International, Phil Hall, contacted me and told me he was using our clipping service to get leads for his news, and he gave me a free subscription to Comics International, which they shipped to me. And so I was making a website on GeoCities, if you remember GeoCities,
Yes.
on the Mighty Crusaders.
Uh-huh.
And I contacted Michael Silverclate, and I said I needed a picture of his, the three founding partners, one of which was his father, that I wanted to put on. I wanted it for the website, but he sent back an email to me saying, "Is this for an article?" And I thought if I said no, he wouldn't send me the picture, and if I said yes, he would. So I contacted Phil and I said, I need to write an article for Comics International so I can get the picture I want. And he said, well, I'm leaving Comics International and I'm starting Borderline Magazine. So if you'd like to write it for Borderline Magazine, we'd love to have you. So I wrote for every issue of Borderline Magazine after that. I did a variety of interviews. And that got me back into journalism, even though I didn't have a storefront.
Mm-hmm.
And then that led to Silver Bullet when Borderline went out of business. And I was at Silver Bullet, and then I went to Newsarama.
Silver
When I was at
Bullet
Newsarama,
was what? What was Silver Bullet?
Oh, Silver Bullet Comic Books was a website. It's now called Comics Bulletin. It changed
Ah,
hands, but it's still.
okay.
And then I went to Newsarama, but several of the interviews that I'd set up, several of the things I had in the works, they had someone at Newsarama already covering that.
Hmm.
And as a freelancer, you give people what they want, but the things I had that they didn't want to use, I had made arrangements to give those to comic book resources. And so I was working for both at the same time.
Nothing wrong with that. You know,
And so, no, nothing wrong with that at all. I was a freelancer.
sure.
And so I would do the interviews that I wanted to do. And at the same time, they would give me assignments of people they wanted me to talk to. And so it was a mix of both. And if they gave me the assignment, I knew they wanted it. And if they didn't give me the assignment, I wasn't entirely sure where it was going to land, but it was going to land somewhere.
From that time period, just posed to you, was there any particularly interesting, something that sticks in your mind, someone that you interviewed at that time that, yeah,
Well, I had chased an interview with Grant Morrison for a year, and then we had a really nice interview with Grant Morrison. I had wanted to do an interview with Neil Adams, and we talked for 3 hours.
whoa.
And at the end of that talk, I typed everything up, and I recorded it on the phone because we did this on the phone. He was in New York, I was in California. So I made an audio recording of it, and then I listened to the audio recording and transcribed the whole thing. And after I had typed it all up, I had to print it out on paper, and then I had to fax it to him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he made corrections on the fax in pencil.
Oh my
And then
goodness.
he faxed that back to me. And then I had to retype it and send it back to him for approval. And it was 27 pages long, typed.
Oh, single
And
space
when
or
we'd
double
finished
space.
going back and forth, we had, and he was finally happy with everything. I turned it into Silver Bullet. And at the time, I was just doing interviews. And they said, it's 27 typed pages. I said, I know. They said, we can't run this as a single interview. No one's going to read it. So they were going to break it up into 5 parts and run it all week long.
And did they do that?
And in that, we had the exclusive that he was going to do Batman again for DC.
Ah, all of that to get to that
Took
single
so long for
exclusive.
them to get that.
Yeah. Ah,
And they took so long in the for the editor to proofread everything and to post everything and get it all up there. Someone else beat us to the scoop.
oh no. Oh no. Timeliness.
And I was very upset that we had lost that. And so when I voiced that, that's when they made me senior editor. And that's when I started editing other people as well.
Okay, now talk about the wonderful website of First Comics News. And
Okay,
people
so
should go there.
while
There's a
I
lot
was
of information.
absolutely, absolutely, and I've been doing that for a long time. Now that's the only place where I put my interviews because actually I own it. But we cover a lot of indie comics, and if you want to see the world of indie comics, we've got a lot of contributors there doing a lot of different things. Just yesterday, we put up an interview for Big Bang Comics. It's a podcast. We had Matt Wagner on there earlier in the week, and they did an interview with me. I was on the Silverline podcast, and we ran the audio on that. We ran, so that's up there as well. But we do a lot of fun things, and we try and promote a lot of indie creators. And we got a lot of questions out with different indie creators, but it takes different amounts of time to get everything back. So there are always a lot of things in the frying pan working its way out.
Uh-huh.
And we're getting ready to go to Comic-Con.
Well, podcasts are great. That's why I
Yeah.
started doing these. We don't have anything out yet. I've been recording them because we want to make sure that we get them right when we get them out. But it won't be too much longer before the heroic voice is out there. You might even want to maybe think about running it on your website once we have
Oh,
it.
absolutely. We would be happy to syndicate it. We just take your feed basically wherever you put it, and we run your feed so that you get all the traffic.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the what is
Because
the RS feed or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, we take they there's a way for us to pull the MP3 file. from your post wherever you put it, if you put it on Podbean or wherever you put it, and then we so that when it plays, you actually get credit for that play, because the way you make any money in the podcasting is
Yes.
by generating enough listeners, and so the listener has to listen.
Well,
Although the feed
also
is on our site, that you have to
just
get
the
credit for that.
publicity
But
generates revenue because it brings people in who,
yes,
may not
that
be
part is true.
interested. Yeah.
That part is absolutely true. And of course, you're a publisher, so then your main deal is to get people to notice your publication and
Yes.
buy your product.
Publications like those.
Exactly. I've been publishing G-Man comics now for the last 5 years. We
That's
put out
right there behind you. G-Man Comics
yes,
just
that
started.
this whole wall behind me is right here. Everything that we've published to date. I've put out 60 comics as of this next Kickstarter that's going live August 1st. And so it would work out theoretically to one a month, but in real life we go on Kickstarter twice a year.
Uh-huh.
And we do that to save on shipping, because you don't want the comic to cost $10 and then pay another $6 in shipping to get one issue,
Yeah, yeah, I've been
because the
through that.
shipping becomes a huge tax on that. And so we have found that once you put it in a Gemini mailer, one comic and 5 comics ship for the same price.
Hmm.
They're in the same price range.
Yes.
And so the idea is that the shipping becomes less of a burden when it becomes, when you buy more than one. You can
Uh-huh.
still buy one and get you can still buy just one, but this coming Kickstarter will have 8 new comics.
Cool. Okay.
So we give you a chance to do that. And one of the things that we're doing with this one that's really exciting to me is we've got a character, Sergeant Flag, who's going to cross over with Bill Black of AC Comics.
Hmm.
Bill started in 1969 producing his own comics and
Yes.
never stopped.
Never stopped.
And his Femforce, which just reached issue 200, it's going on 204 with the next issue coming out. It's not monthly. I mean, it's quarterly, but he's never stopped.
Right.
And
Bill
so it is
has
now the longest running, continuously published.
indeed.
Cerebus went to 300, Spawn's at like 350, but they haven't have a run since I think 82 is when Femforce starts.
Yeah.
You're in that range.
I am. We started publishing stuff in, well, Fantasy Book, which is not a comic book, was 81. The first comic
Yeah,
books that we did through Eclipse and Renegade Press. And we
right.
started publish our own in 87.
Yeah.
Uh,
So yeah, you've been publishing for a long time. But Bill also made independent films, and he sells them on Night Vale Media. And so if you like his superheroes, you can see his superheroes in some B movies that he also produced. So the idea was we were going to do a story where our character was going to be popular on social media. And as a result of that, some film producers were going to come and try and make a cop style TV show called Capes, where they just follow him around, and do a docuseries, and they can, all the action will be the action for the show. And so I cast Bill Black and Mark Holmes as the director and cameraman. And so I sent photos of them to the artist, and the artist drew them into the book as the Hollywood people trying to make this TV series.
huh.
We picked Sergeant Flag because he's the least likely to be cooperative. And so we have a lot of fun with the character who doesn't have a PG-13 vocabulary, trying to edit himself and fit on TV while he's trying to do his job at the same time and not being very happy about it.
Tell people
And so
where they can find these G-Man books. Obviously, the Kickstarter are going to
we
be out
sell
there.
exclusively on Kickstarter. The website is g-man-comics.com. I also have a domain forwarder from, if you just mush it all together, is gmancomics.com.
Okay.
So you'll end up in the same spot. There's a link on the homepage that'll take you to the Kickstarter, and the Kickstarters start on August 1st and February 1st of every year. And any back issues you want, you can get at the same time through the Kickstarter. But we found that we'd rather sell direct to the customer.
Yeah, I've found that as well. And when we've been putting books out, we've been doing the funding for those through Kickstarter as well, and we've had some pretty good success with that.
Yeah,
And we did try the multiple issue approach as well, for the very same reason that you cited. Doing several issues at once, saves on postage.
right, exactly. It's a savings to the customer, and we hope
Yeah.
that they appreciate it. We've never done it the other way, so I don't know if it would work better if every month we had a Kickstarter and they just had to pay a higher percentage in postage of their total order. But I think that they would rather, have postage turn out to be 75 cents a book rather than $6 a book.
I suspect that's true. You know,
Yeah, I do too, but I don't know because you never know. You look at some of these limited edition covers that Marvel and DC put out, and they sell for far more than any of the Kickstarter books, including postage. I mean, one book is $10 and postage is 6 for just one. And so you're looking at $16. And the day of publication, there's always a limited Marvel or DC book that's going for more than $16
yeah,
right in your comic shop. And sometimes in a multiple of 10 or 20, with some of these limited covers that they put out. They did. I don't know how many covers they put out on X-Men, but I mean, it's not unusual for Marvel to put out 22 covers for one
whoa,
comic.
yeah. My goodness. Okay, let's talk. Yeah, I try to keep these. I'm trying to keep these like half an hour or so, 40 minutes.
Sure.
I'm not sure how far we're into this. It's because this has been really interesting. I haven't really been keeping track of time. But let's,
I don't see a counter on here either, so I don't
yeah,
see how we recorded.
I just have the clock on my
Oh,
computer.
it says meeting 40 minutes, so I don't know if we're scheduled for 40 minutes or if we've gone 40 minutes.
No, it's 40 minutes long. That's basically, and I would try to wrap it up around the 30-minute mark. But what else is there? The state of the comic book
So,
industry, favorite characters, stuff that, what got you into comics in the first place?
okay, well, my father was a comic fan in the Golden Age. And whenever he got a bad report card, his mother would take all his comics and throw them away.
Ah,
It was very common in those days, which is why
yes.
those comics are worth a fortune, is because they're not between the war drive and parents not having any value for them and being no collectible market. They were considered throwaway entertainment. And so the fact that any of them survived is what made them valuable now. But when I was little, he started buying comics for me and then reading them to me. Basically, I assume so he could read the comics again as an adult and not feel like he's doing something too childish because he was reading them to me. And my favorite comic when I was little was the Teen Titans. And when they canceled the Teen Titans, I got a subscription to the Flash, hoping I could see Kid Flash in the Flash comic. And I think that probably happened 4 times in my lifetime before Wally West became the Flash. He wasn't there a whole lot, but I've read every single issue of the Flash from that point forward, and then I went back and collected them all the way back to 105. And I bought every issue of Justice League. I got every
Well,
issue
for
of
people who don't
Daredevil,
know, issue 105 was in fact the first issue of the Silver Age Flash.
the Silver Age Flash.
Right.
Yes. I had every issue of Avengers, every issue of X-Men. I had 10,000 comics at one point, and then I opened a comic store, and then I had almost no comics because you don't really have a store if you don't have anything to sell. And I had one copy of 10,000 different comics.
Oh my goodness. That's kind of
Yeah.
my story too, because I had a complete collection of Marvel comics that I maintained from like the, early 60s on through the mid 80s when I kind of lost interest in what they were doing. Things changed after Stan and Roy left. Um,
I liked. I liked comics. I got serious about comics probably in the '70s when I liked them, but I didn't. Yeah, I guess I really hit collecting in the '80s, and so the '80s and '90s are kind of my sweet spot for the comics, which is probably the time that you dipped out. But I loved Watchmen. I loved Dark Knight, which are probably things that didn't necessarily appeal to Bronze Age fans. But the stuff I write myself is not grim and gritty. The stuff I write myself is more classical superhero stuff.
ooh,
Um,
likewise, likewise, yeah.
if I'm right, um, Simon and Kirby, the agent, is the main book, and this is done in a Captain America kind of style, with the Avengers. So he's the leader of a team of superheroes, and mixed into that team are heroes from other creators. We have a level on the backing where your character can join, and so every issue has different characters from different creators in there, at least in a cameo role. And I do it kind of Mission Impossible style, if you remember the old Peter Graves one, where he selects different characters, different agents to join him on his mission. And here we have different superheroes join him, whoever is necessary for that particular mission. I mean, the X-Men kind of do that anyway, where they have different teams, but they like to focus on one team, one small team, and then they'll put another small team in a different book. We don't have a million books like that. Mm-hmm. So spinning out of Simon and Kirby the Agent, I did a 90s style superhero who was also patriotic, and that was Sergeant Flag. And so Sergeant Flag is much more extreme and much more violent, and all the fun that you'd have with the 90s Marvel comics or the Image comics when they came out. Much less on character development and much more on a lot of action, a lot of fun. It turns out he's a lot of fun to write. It's kind of like if the Punisher really enjoyed himself instead of was miserable all the time. That's the hallmark of the Punisher, is that he really enjoys fighting and killing people, but he feels bad about it because his family died and he can never get over that. And so he's always sour and ire and
oh my goodness,
dour.
Yeah, poor Frank.
What if you leaned into it? What if you thought that this was a good thing? What if you were, rescuing people and doing good things and felt good about what you were doing? And so we go about it in that kind of direction. And I like some humor.
You're talking about a 1960s approach to the Punisher here. I don't know if you've ever thought much about what the actual difference is. What the actual difference is between the approach that was used by, Julie Schwartz at DC and Stan Lee at Marvel. All of the DC heroes were protectors at heart. Every one of them had a city that they protected. Right. In Stan's approach, they were basically adventurers who ran up against adversaries. It was very different philosophically.
We've got a little different feel to it too. All of our characters are registered with the government as superheroes. They become deputized, so they're not held liable for all the damage that happens to the community, and so the government can keep track of who's who and what's what and what's going on. And so he calls up different people for different missions, which allows us to rotate the team and change things up. But it also allows for some of the heroes to be full-time superheroes and on the government payroll. And so they don't have to have a different job. And so you see them going into work together. You see them taking a lunch break together, and just living in the superhero world of what it's like to be a superhero without having to worry about hiding your identity from everyone who should be able to recognize you at the Daily Planet or the Daily Bugle.
How many of these issues have you produced of this comic?
We produced 60 comics so far. But the longest running title is on its 10th issue. We've been doing this for 5 years. We do 2 Kickstarters a year, and so that gets us to 10. We produce a variety of different comics with different creators, and so I write several of them, but I don't write all of them. And my partners, Eric and Jim, also write their characters, and we do a shared universe. And we I love this way Marvel did the shared universe. DC always had a shared universe too, but it wasn't quite the same because all the characters didn't just randomly walk around the other characters' books. Mm-hmm. At DC, it was more of a special thing if Batman showed up in Flash or if Wonder Woman were to show up in Green Lantern. You know what I mean? They made a bigger deal of it. At Marvel, Spider-Man or Spider-Man's villains would show up in Daredevil just randomly. The Thing and the Hulk would fight. And so we don't, I have them all working for the FBI, so they all run into each other and cross over with each other at all times. The villains cross over.
Well, they work together, right? So of course they're going to bump into each other.
Yeah, exactly. And so we've confined them all to a small location so that they all kind of run into each other too, which should be happening, because all the Marvel characters took place in Manhattan.
Yes.
There probably were other
Or
superheroes in
Forest
other places in
Hills
the
or
world.
Westchester County.
Yeah, exactly. If you're a mutant, you're in Westchester County. And if you're a superhero, you're in Manhattan. And the champions were over in LA a little, and then you had the West Coast Avengers for a little while, and even the Midwest Avengers. But in general, everyone's kind of based in New York.
Hmm.
And so they confine all their characters together so they all kind of run into each other. For DC, they are characters all over the world. They're just spread out everywhere, and they're all in fictitious cities. And
Okay, let's.
so it's a little different approach.
This is great. Once again, do you have a Facebook page, social media? Where can people
I've
follow
got,
you
I've
on
got a
that?
lot of social media. I've got social media for myself and
There
for
you go.
G-Man Comics.
Yeah.
And so if you just, or you can just Google me and you'll find everything. But my name is Rik, R-I-K, Offenberger, Offenberger. And I'm on Facebook and primarily. And then you can find the website for G-Man Comics is g-man-comics.com. First Comics News all runs together, firstcomicsnews.com. And if you love indie comics or you're just curious about indie comics, there are people with a tremendous amount of passion for what they put out.
Tremendous talent as well.
It is, yeah, and a tremendous amount of talent, and it's not the same. And when you get into them, you'll see, because DC and Marvel have to put out a book every 30 days, and they have to, and Marvel didn't at one point. Marvel used to have filler stories and used to have reprints and all sorts of things like that in the 80s, in the late 70s, early 80s. But since then, it's a comic every month. And so as a result, sometimes some stories don't feel quite as passionate as other stories. But with indie comics, they aren't on that same tight schedule. And usually the creators are much more invested. And so you get a different flavor of comics.
Much different.
Um,
Great. Any
and
last thoughts here? Any last words, things that you would recommend to people? Do you have anything that you really like that's not yours, that's being produced these days that that you want to turn people on to?
well, I mean, obviously we like heroic publishing, and we've been a big supporter of yours all
You're
these
just saying
years.
that, but I appreciate the
No, it's
saying.
actually true. It's actually true. And big fan of AC Comics and what Bill Black and Mark Heike and Stephanie Heike have been doing over there, literally since
We
1969.
got to do a
Uh,
crossover with Bill at some point. Some crossover story. I got to get in touch with him and approach that idea.
oh, absolutely. But we like the small. We like all the small publishers. I mean, people may not have heard of Argo Comics in mass, you know what I mean? But we like to promote everything they do. And then you've got the smaller publishers published through Diamond. And so we like to give Mad Cave a lot of coverage. We like to cover, a lot of the small publishers, just anyone who's out there doing it. Our buddy's putting out Rob Hayes Adventures, and he's doing that for like 30 years. And so, and I'm going to see him in San Diego. And, it's just nice to see people who really love the craft. I mean, the only reason I do these comics is because I love it. You know what I mean? Comics and comic journalism. No one's doing this to get rich. I
That's
don't know
certainly
that there's
true.
anyone in small press that's wealthy from small press.
Oh my
I
goodness.
don't know anyone who's in comic journalism making a fortune, and so it's really just a matter of love for the comics and love for the medium and wanting to promote this. I've got two panels in San Diego. One is how to get news coverage, which is literally to help small press publishers figure out how to put together a media package to get coverage for what they're doing. And then we have a Mighty Crusaders panel. I worked for Archie for a decade, and I did the Mighty Crusaders panel for Archie when I was at Archie, and since then I've still done it at San Diego Comic Con and
Will there
WonderCon.
be video of these that people can get when up?
No,
Because this is
these
probably not going to appear before the San Diego convention, so it would be nice if
no,
people
it
could
won't.
actually.
When during the pandemic, San Diego Comic Con recorded them and put them on YouTube, and so you can see it on their channels for
Okay,
the year that we did that. but in general, I mean, we're basically we get passes to go to San Diego Comic Con to put on the panel, and so we're basically the entertainment there. That's what the whole
Yeah.
point of the panels are, is that when they go and they buy their ticket, we have something to say and something interesting
Well,
and
back in
something
the
to
day, they
engage
used
them
to
and make
film
them.
all of the panels and, put them up at least
Oh,
on.
they film it.
Yeah.
There's someone filming it. I've just never seen it used anywhere else
Oh,
afterwards.
well, you should mention that to them. We
So
need
I
to put
know
all
they'll
these
film
things
it.
up where people can see them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they weren't hoping people will buy a ticket instead. I
Oh,
think
okay.
that
All righty.
they're not
Rick, it's a
interested in
pleasure. I love having you
producing.
here.
Thank
We
you.
should do this again. Um,
Absolutely.
all right. So it's I'm gonna, turn this off, remind people to
Sure.
subscribe, hit the like button to all this stuff, and visit firstcomicsnews.com and
Comics.
g-man-comics.com. All righty.
Yes. Thank you.
Good night.